Chinese folk religion: the living synthesis. Beliefs, rituals, and traditions. The most widely practiced religion in China, without a founder, without a pope, without a single sacred text. A living, breathing synthesis of Taoism, Buddhism, Confucianism, ancestor veneration, spirit mediums, and local deity worship woven so seamlessly into daily life that most practitioners do not call it religion at all. Haligricity's oldest living cousin. Personal reading series Mei Yiling Yiluk Haligricity Yi Q. Productions. Contents. Introduction, A Religion with No Name, Why That Matters. Part 1, Historical Roots, From Oracle Bones to the Present. Part 2, The Three Teachings and How They Blend. Part 3, The Heavenly Bureaucracy, How Chinese Folk Religion Organizes the Divine. Part 4, The Major Deities, Gods of Every Dimension of Life. Part 5, The Goddess Mazu, Queen of Heaven and the Sea. Part 6, Guanyin, Goddess of Mercy and Compassion. Part 7, The Kitchen God, Sacred Presence in the Home. Part 8, The Earth God, Sacred Presence in the Land. Part 9, The Dragon Kings, Water, Weather, and Cosmic Power. Part 10, Ancestor Veneration, The Dead as Living Community. Part 11, The Temple, Sacred Infrastructure of the Community. Part 12, Divination, Spirit Mediums, and the Oracle Tradition. Part 13, Sacred Festivals and the Chinese Calendar. Part 14, Birth, Marriage, Death, the Life Cycle Rites. Part 15, Chinese Folk Medicine and the Sacred Body. Part 16, Feng Shui, Sacred Geography and the Living Environment. Part 17, Chinese Folk Religion Today. Part 18, Haligricity Convergences. Introduction. Ask a Chinese farmer in Fujian Province, or a shopkeeper in Taiwan, or a grandmother in Singapore's Chinatown what religion they practice, and most will say they have no religion, or they will say they are Buddhist, or Taoist, or that they follow the customs of their ancestors. Very few will say Chinese folk religion. But watch what they do. They burn incense at the kitchen shrine before cooking. They visit the temple on the 1st and 15th of the lunar month. They carry offerings of food and paper money to the graves of their grandparents at Qingming. They consult a diviner before making a major business decision. They hang the image of the door gods at New Year and send the kitchen god to report on the family's conduct to the Jade Emperor in heaven. This is Chinese folk religion, the living, breathing, uncodified, non-institutional sacred tradition that has organized the spiritual life of the majority of Chinese people for at least 3,000 years. It has no single founder, no single scripture, no central institution, and no single name, because it is not a single thing. It is the ongoing, practical synthesis of everything: Taoism's cosmology and ritual, Buddhism's afterlife teaching and compassionate bodhisattvas, Confucianism's ethic of social harmony and ancestor reverence, the shamanic tradition of spirit communication that predates all of these, and the inexhaustible local particularity of specific gods worshipped in specific communities because of specific historical events that happened in specific places. For Haligricity, Chinese folk religion is uniquely important. It is the tradition that most closely resembles what Haligricity itself is doing. It is a genuine, living, multi-generational synthesis, not an academic exercise in comparison but a lived practice that billions of people have inhabited for millennia. It works not because someone decided to synthesize these traditions but because each element serves a genuine need and the whole serves the community's complete sacred life. Understanding how it works is understanding how synthesis works when it works. Historical roots from oracle bones to the present. The earliest documented evidence of Chinese religious practice comes from the Shang dynasty, specifically from the oracle bones, animal bones and turtle shells used for divination, inscribed with questions posed to the ancestors and to the high god De, and then heated until they cracked, with the crack patterns interpreted as the ancestors or deities' answer. Oracle bone divination is the earliest form of Chinese writing. The written language itself emerged from sacred practice. The oracle bones reveal a religious world organized around four principles that would persist through all subsequent Chinese religious development. The ancestors are active participants in the affairs of the living. The divine realm is organized hierarchically with a supreme figure at the apex. Communication between the human and divine realms is possible through properly trained specialists, and the proper conduct of ritual is essential to the community's welfare. These four principles, ancestor activity, divine hierarchy, ritual communication, and ritual correctness, are as present in a contemporary Chinese temple as they were in the Shang royal court. The Zhou dynasty and the mandate of heaven. The Zhou dynasty, which displaced the Shang and justified its rule through the concept of the mandate of heaven, developed the theological infrastructure that would remain fundamental to Chinese religious life. the understanding that heaven is the supreme moral force of the cosmos, that rulers govern legitimately only as long as they embody heaven's moral will, and that natural disasters, social chaos, and military defeat are heaven's signals that the mandate has been withdrawn. The mandate of heaven is not merely a political doctrine, it is a cosmological claim about the relationship between moral order and physical reality. The Axial Age and the Three Teachings. The period between approximately 600and 公元前200年, China's Axial Age, produced the three philosophical and religious traditions that would shape Chinese civilization: Confucianism, Taoism, and the Buddhist teaching, which arrived in China from India gradually from the 1st century CE onward and was thoroughly syncretized by the Tang dynasty, 618至907 CE. All three were absorbed into the living practice of Chinese folk religion, which continued alongside and through them, taking what was useful from each and organizing it around the needs of actual communities. The three teachings and how they blend. The Sanjiao, the three teachings of Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, are often described as the three pillars of Chinese civilization. In Chinese folk religion, they are not three separate religions practiced by different people. They are three dimensions of a single integrated sacred life, each addressing different aspects of human need and different temporal horizons of concern. Confucianism, the ethics of this life. Confucianism provides the ethical and social framework, the proper ordering of human relationships, the cultivation of virtue through education and ritual propriety, the centrality of filial piety as the root of all ethical life, and the ancestor veneration practices that maintain the relationship between the living and the dead. In Chinese folk religion, Confucianism provides the social structure within which all religious practice occurs, the understanding that the family is the primary sacred unit, that proper relationships within the family are themselves a form of sacred practice, and that the dead deserve the same respectful, attentive relationship as the living. Taoism, the cosmology and the ritual technology. Taoism provides the cosmological framework and the ritual technology, the Taoist priest who performs exorcisms, funeral rites, healing ceremonies, and the complex liturgical rituals that address the full divine hierarchy on behalf of the community. Taoism also provides the most complete account of the spiritual cosmos, the heavens, the underworld, the immortals, the divine bureaucracy, that Chinese folk religion inhabits. The Taoist understanding of qi as the fundamental substance of all reality underlies Chinese medicine, feng shui, martial arts, and the entire landscape of Chinese sacred practice. Buddhism, the afterlife theology and the compassionate ones. Buddhism provides the most developed afterlife theology, karma, rebirth, the pure land where Amitabha Buddha welcomes the faithful, the compassionate bodhisattvas who remain in the world to assist those who call upon them, and the elaborate cosmology of heavens and hells that has been thoroughly integrated into Chinese folk religion's understanding of what happens after death. Buddhist monks perform funeral rites, Buddhist temples provide spaces for prayer and worship, and Buddhist concepts of karma and merit have been thoroughly integrated into folk religion's practical ethics. The integration in practice. In practice, the average Chinese folk religion practitioner does not experience these three dimensions as separate traditions requiring different allegiances. They go to the Taoist temple on the god's birthday, they burn incense to Guanyin at the same temple, they maintain an ancestor altar according to Confucian ritual protocols, and they organize their family's social life around Confucian relational ethics, all without any sense of contradiction or category confusion. The three teachings are not three religions competing for exclusive loyalty. They are three tools in a single sacred toolkit, each used for the purpose to which it is best suited. Connection to Haligricity. The three teachings integration in Chinese folk religion is the most ancient and most thoroughly field-tested example of what Haligricity is doing, a synthesis that takes the best tools from multiple traditions and organizes them around the actual needs of a living community, without requiring that practitioners choose one tradition and reject all others. The Chinese practitioner who lights incense to a Taoist deity, prays to a Buddhist bodhisattva, and maintains a Confucian ancestor altar is not confused. They are demonstrating the most sophisticated and most practical possible relationship to the sacred, a both Taoisean and orientation grounded not in academic tolerance but in lived experience of what actually works. The heavenly bureaucracy how Chinese folk religion organizes the divine. One of the most distinctive and intellectually fascinating features of Chinese folk religion is its organization of the divine realm as a bureaucracy, mirroring and corresponding to the imperial administration of earthly China. This is not a metaphor or a simplification. It is a fully developed theological system in which the heavens are governed by the Jade Emperor as the supreme divine administrator, with a full hierarchy of gods, officials, messengers, and record-keepers organized into departments with specific jurisdictions, reporting structures, and accountability mechanisms. The Jade Emperor and the Celestial Administration. The Jade Emperor presides over a celestial court that mirrors the imperial court of China in its organizational structure. Gods have ranks, jurisdictions, performance reviews, and careers. They can be promoted or demoted based on their performance in managing their domain. Local earth gods report upward through the divine administrative hierarchy. The kitchen god submits an annual report on each family's conduct to the celestial administration. The dragon kings manage regional weather under the Jade Emperor's overall authority. This bureaucratic theology has several important practical consequences. First, it means that no god is absolutely sovereign. Every divine being operates within a system of accountability, which is reassuring to practitioners who can in principle appeal decisions or seek a higher divine authority when a local deity fails them. Second, it means that the divine realm is not simply good. It contains officials who may be corrupt, inefficient, or simply overworked, just as human bureaucracies do. Third, it means that human ritual action has genuine leverage in the divine system. Burning incense, making offerings, and petitioning the gods is the equivalent of submitting a formal petition to a government official, and it works for the same reason. It creates a formal record that the appropriate authority must acknowledge. Connection to Haligricity. The Chinese folk religion understanding that the divine realm is organized and accountable, that the gods operate within a system of relationships, responsibilities, and consequences, is a sophisticated theological alternative to both the omnipotent singular God of Abrahamic religion and the indifferent universe of secular materialism. For Haligricity, this resonates with the understanding that the sacred operates through specific channels, specific forces, and specific relationships, not as an undifferentiated omnipotence that either grants or denies requests arbitrarily. The Haligric practitioner who works with specific deities, specific ancestral presences, and specific elemental forces is operating within the same practical theology as the Chinese folk religion practitioner, the recognition that the divine has structure, and that working skillfully with that structure produces results. The major deities gods of every dimension of life. Chinese folk religion has hundreds, in some enumerations, thousands, of deities, each with specific domains, specific ritual needs, and specific communities of practice. What follows is a guide to the most widely worshipped figures, covering the deities whose shrines appear in temples across China, Southeast Asia, and wherever Chinese communities have settled in the diaspora. It is important to understand that Chinese folk religion deities are not mythological figures from an ancient past. Many of them, including Mazu, Guandi, and the city god, began as actual historical human beings who were deified after their deaths because of their extraordinary virtue, their efficacious answer to prayers, or the miracles attributed to them. The deification of humans is not a marginal feature of Chinese folk religion. It is one of its most important mechanisms, confirming the tradition's understanding that the boundary between the human and the divine is permeable and that genuine virtue produces genuine sacred power. Jade Emperor, Yu Huangshangdi. Supreme ruler of heaven and earth. The supreme deity of the Chinese divine bureaucracy, the celestial emperor who governs all gods, all humans, and all nature from the highest heaven. His birthday is celebrated on the 9th day of the first lunar month with elaborate offerings and ceremonies. He is not worshipped primarily as a personal deity but as the ultimate authority within whose order all other sacred practice occurs. He is depicted in imperial robes, seated on a throne, holding the jade tablet of heavenly authority. Guanyin, goddess of mercy, the compassionate one who hears the cries of the world. Originally the Indian bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara, Guanyin was transformed in China into a female figure of boundless compassion, one of the most beloved sacred figures in all of East Asia. She hears every cry of distress and rushes to assist without discrimination. She helps the poor, the sick, the childless, the lost at sea, the wrongly accused. She holds a willow branch and a vase of pure water. She is worshipped by the full spectrum of the Chinese population, farmers, merchants, scholars, fishermen, mothers, children, because everyone, at some point, needs someone who will hear them without judgment and help without condition. Guandi, god of war and righteousness. The sacred warrior, patron of police, soldiers, and brotherhoods based on the historical figure Guan Yu, a general of the Three Kingdoms period famous for his extraordinary loyalty and moral courage. Guandi is one of the most widely worshipped deities in Chinese folk religion. He is the patron of soldiers, police officers, sworn brotherhoods, and practitioners of martial arts. He is also the patron of business people. His temple image is dramatically powerful, a red-faced warrior with a magnificent beard, typically dressed in green robes and holding a crescent blade polearm. Cai Shen, god of wealth, bringer of prosperity and financial fortune. The god of wealth is among the most frequently invoked deities in Chinese daily life. His image appears in businesses, homes, and restaurants throughout the Chinese world. He is not a deity of greed but of righteous prosperity, the understanding that abundance flows naturally toward those who conduct their affairs with honesty, generosity, and proper ritual observance. His birthday is celebrated with firecracker barrages and elaborate offerings as merchants and families invite his presence for the new year. The goddess Mazu, queen of heaven and the sea. Mazu is one of the most important goddesses in the entire Chinese religious world, with an estimated 6 million or more active devotees in China, Taiwan, Southeast Asia, and wherever Chinese communities have settled. She began as an actual historical human being, Lin Mo, born on Meizhou Island in Fujian province, and was deified after her death because of the extraordinary efficacy of prayers made to her by sailors in distress. The historical Lin Mo was born into a fishing family during the Northern Song dynasty. According to the hagiographic tradition, she demonstrated extraordinary spiritual gifts from birth. She reportedly did not cry as a newborn. She was drawn to spiritual study from childhood, and began exhibiting abilities associated with shamanic and mediumistic practice, the ability to enter trance states, to have visions, and to communicate with the divine. She died young, at 27 or 28, by different accounts, either during a rescue mission at sea or during a mountaintop meditation. Almost immediately after her death, sailors began reporting miraculous rescues attributed to her intervention. The cult of Mazu. Mazu's cult spread along the coast of China with remarkable speed, following the routes of maritime trade and fishing communities who needed a powerful protector of those who worked the sea. By the Song and Yuan dynasties, she had been officially recognized by the imperial court, given progressively elevated titles, and incorporated into the official divine hierarchy. Today she is worshipped in over 15 temples worldwide and is the central focus of one of the largest religious pilgrimages in the world, the annual pilgrimage to the Mazu Temple on Meizhou Island in Fujian province, which draws hundreds of thousands of devotees. The ritual center of Mazu worship is the temple parade, a ceremonial procession in which Mazu's image is carried through the community on a palanquin, visiting every household and business, blessing the community with her presence, and receiving offerings in return. The parade is accompanied by elaborate processional music, lion and dragon dances, firecracker barrages, and performances of folk opera, a complete sensory environment that makes the goddess's presence palpably real in the community's shared experience. Connection to Haligricity. Mazu's theological significance for Haligricity goes beyond her status as a powerful protective goddess. Her history, from historical human being of extraordinary spiritual gifts to fully deified goddess who commands the devotion of tens of millions, is the most complete living example of what the Chinese sacred tradition holds about the permeability of the boundary between the human and the divine. A human being of sufficient virtue, spiritual development, and genuine compassion does not merely approach the divine, they become an expression of it, capable after death of functioning as a full vehicle of sacred power. This is the Chinese folk religion parallel to the Orthodox Christian theosis, the Haligricity understanding of the practitioner as a genuine vehicle of sacred force, and the Bobo Bwa mask theology, properly prepared and properly lived humanity is a vehicle for the divine, not merely a recipient of its grace. Guanyin, goddess of mercy and compassion. Guanyin deserves separate treatment because she occupies a unique position in Chinese religious life. She is simultaneously the most widely worshipped deity in Chinese folk religion, the most important bodhisattva in Chinese Buddhism, and a figure whose appeal transcends any single tradition or community. Her image appears in Buddhist temples, Taoist temples, folk religion shrines, and the homes of people who would describe themselves as belonging to none of these traditions. She is the figure to whom the desperate turn when all other resources have been exhausted, the universal compassionate presence who does not discriminate. The gender transformation. The transformation of the Indian bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara from a male figure into the female Guanyin is one of the most significant and most revealing events in the history of Chinese religion. The transformation began during the Tang dynasty and was complete by the Song dynasty. The reasons are complex, partly aesthetic, partly theological, partly social, but the result reflects a profound cultural recognition that the quality of unlimited compassion, the willingness to hear every cry of suffering without discrimination and respond without condition, was most authentically embodied in the feminine principle. The Chinese religious imagination transformed Avalokiteshvara into Guanyin not by diminishing the bodhisattva's power but by recognizing that this specific quality of compassion is most fully expressed in a female form. Guanyin and the childless. Among Guanyin's most important functions in Chinese folk religion is her role as the bestower of children on those who have been unable to conceive. This role, rooted in a specific Buddhist sutra text that lists the birth of a son or a daughter as among the benefits of calling on Guanyin's name, made her the primary focus of one of the most urgent needs in traditional Chinese family life. The prayers offered to Guanyin for children are among the most heartfelt in Chinese religious practice, and the gratitude of those whose prayers were answered is the primary driver of her cult's extraordinary expansion. The kitchen god's sacred presence in the home. The kitchen god is the most intimate and most theologically sophisticated deity in Chinese folk religion, the sacred presence who inhabits not a grand temple but the most essential room of every home, the kitchen, where the family's sustenance is prepared and the fire of life is maintained. He is simultaneously a protective presence, a moral monitor, and a divine messenger, and his annual journey to heaven to report on the family's conduct is one of the most charming and most revealing rituals in the entire tradition. The annual cycle of the kitchen god. On the 23rd day of the 12th lunar month, the kitchen god departs for heaven to deliver his annual report on the family's conduct to the Jade Emperor. The family performs a specific farewell ceremony. They make offerings of sweet foods to the kitchen god's image, sometimes smearing the honey directly on the lips of his image, with the explicit intention of ensuring that he says sweet things about the family in his report, or that his lips will be too sticky to say anything critical. This ritual is at once completely practical and completely theologically sophisticated. It acknowledges that the divine monitor is a real presence in the household, that the family's conduct is actually observed and actually reported. It also demonstrates the characteristic Chinese folk religion pragmatism. Rather than simply trying to be good, the family takes direct ritual action to influence the outcome of the divine review process. The sweet offering is not bribery in a corrupt sense. It is a ritual act of relationship with the divine official who is part of the household's extended sacred community. After the kitchen god departs, the household lives for 1 week without his immediate presence. The period during which the gods are in heaven and the world below is less strictly monitored, which is why the days before New Year are associated with a kind of sacred license. On New Year's Day, a new image of the kitchen god is installed, and the household begins the new year with its divine monitor returned to his post. Connection to Haligricity. The kitchen god's theology, a sacred presence inhabiting the center of domestic daily life, observing and recording the family's actual conduct rather than their formal religious performance, is the Chinese folk religion articulation of what Haligricity holds about the sacredness of the everyday. The Haligric meal blessing is the closest contemporary Haligric practice to kitchen god theology. It transforms the act of cooking and eating from a purely physical transaction into a sacred one, acknowledging the sacred presence in the kitchen space and in the act of preparing food. The Chinese understanding that the home's most essential room is a sacred space inhabited by a genuine divine presence, not merely a kitchen where cooking happens to occur, is the same recognition the Haligric meal blessing enacts. The earth god's sacred presence in the land. If the kitchen god is the sacred guardian of the household, the earth god is the sacred guardian of the specific piece of land on which the household stands. He is the most locally specific and most intimate of all the deities in the Chinese folk religion system. Every village, every neighborhood, every plot of land has its own specific earth god who is responsible for its welfare, its fertility, and its community of inhabitants. The earth god's domain. Tu Digong's jurisdiction is hyperlocal, a specific village, a specific neighborhood, sometimes a specific field or plot of land. This hyperlocality is not a limitation but a feature. The earth god knows his specific territory intimately, knows its history, knows the people who live there, and is accountable for what happens there in a way that no more exalted deity could be. The farmer who goes to the earth god's shrine before planting is going to the sacred authority who actually knows this specific soil, this specific microclimate, this specific field's history of abundance or difficulty. Earth god shrines. Earth god shrines are among the most common sacred sites in Chinese communities, small, often simple structures at the edge of villages, at crossroads, under significant trees, at the boundaries of fields, and in the corners of homes and businesses. Unlike the grand temple complexes of the major deities, earth god shrines are modest and intimate, a small image of the god, a pair of incense sticks, and a small offering tray. The simplicity is appropriate. Tu Digong is the most accessible, most familiar, most neighborhood-scale deity in the system. The earth god and the dead. Tu Digong also plays a role in the afterlife system of Chinese folk religion. He is often understood as escorting the recently deceased on their initial journey through the spiritual bureaucracy, serving as their guide and advocate as they navigate the divine administrative process. In this function he serves as a psychopomp, a guide of souls, which connects him to the shamanic tradition's spirit guide figures and to the hermetic figure of Hermes in his role as conductor of souls to the underworld. The Dragon King's water, weather, and cosmic power. The Dragon Kings are among the most powerful and most cosmologically significant figures in Chinese folk religion, the divine rulers of the seas, rivers, lakes, and the rain, who command the weather and control the water resources on which Chinese agricultural civilization depends. Unlike Western dragons, Chinese dragons are fundamentally auspicious beings, symbols of divine power, cosmic creativity, and the transformative force of water and weather. The Chinese dragon. The Chinese dragon is a composite creature, serpentine body, with the scales of a fish, the claws of an eagle, the antlers of a deer, and the whiskers of a catfish, that embodies the synthesis of multiple natural forces. It is the creature of in-between states. It moves between water and sky, between the terrestrial and the celestial, between the visible world and the hidden depths. The dragon is the supreme symbol of yin energy in its most creative, most dynamic, most cosmically powerful form. The four dragon kings and their courts. The primary dragon kings are four in number, corresponding to the four seas: the dragon king of the East Sea, the dragon king of the South Sea, the dragon king of the West Sea, and the dragon king of the North Sea. Each maintains an underwater palace from which they govern their domain, with full courts of divine fish officials, sea creature retainers, and weather-controlling ministers. Regional rivers and significant lakes have their own specific dragon kings as well, creating a vast network of water-governing divine presences across the Chinese landscape. Drought ritual and the dragon kings. When drought threatened communities in traditional China, the ritual response was to petition the dragon kings directly, with elaborate ceremonies, processions, and offerings at temples and at significant bodies of water. If the dragon king failed to respond to respectful petition, the community might escalate to ritual pressure, exposing the dragon king's image to the hot sun, or removing his image from the water and placing it in the scorching heat until he relented. This tradition of holding the god accountable, of escalating from respectful petition to direct ritual pressure when petitions are ignored, is one of the most distinctive features of Chinese folk religion's pragmatic approach to the divine. Ancestor veneration. The dead as living community. Ancestor veneration is the oldest, deepest, and most universally practiced element of Chinese sacred life, predating Confucianism, Taoism, and Buddhism, and persisting through all of China's historical upheavals including the Cultural Revolution. It is not merely a cultural custom. It is a theological claim that the dead continue to exist, that they maintain a relationship with the living, that they have needs, and that they have power. The ancestor altar. The ancestor altar is the sacred center of the Chinese household, a wooden shelf, altar table, or dedicated room containing the spirit tablets of the ancestors, wooden plaques inscribed with the name, dates, and titles of the deceased, which serve as the material focal points of the ancestors' ongoing presence in the household. The spirit tablet is not merely a memorial, it is understood as a genuine locus of the ancestors' presence, maintained through regular offerings and tended with the same attentive care one would give to an honored elder who happens to be invisible. Regular offerings, rice, soup, vegetables, fruit, tea, wine, incense, are placed before the ancestor altar at meals. The ancestors eat first, symbolically, before the family eats, affirming the ongoing community that includes both the living and the dead. On the 1st and 15th of each lunar month, and on the anniversaries of the ancestors' births and deaths, more elaborate offerings are made. The Qingming Festival. The Qingming Festival is the primary occasion for communal ancestor veneration in the Chinese calendar, a day when families visit graves, clean the grave sites, make offerings of food and incense, and burn paper money, paper houses, paper clothing, and paper luxury goods to send to the ancestors in the afterlife. The burning is essential. It is the ritual technology through which physical objects are transformed into their spiritual equivalents, transmitting them across the boundary between the living and the dead. The Ghost Month. The 7th lunar month is the Ghost Month, the period when the gates of the spirit world open and the dead roam freely in the human world. The Ghost Festival on the 15th day of the 7th month is the primary ceremony for feeding and appeasing the hungry ghosts, the spirits of those who have no living descendants to make offerings for them. Elaborate offerings are made at community altars, paper money and goods are burned, and Buddhist monks chant sutras to ease the suffering of the hungry ghosts. The Ghost Month Festival is simultaneously a communal act of compassion and a practical act of community safety. Connection to Haligricity. Chinese ancestor veneration is the most thoroughly developed, most practically sophisticated, and most continuously practiced ancestor tradition in the world, and it confirms in the most complete possible way what Haligricity holds about the ancestor altar practice. The Chinese understanding that the dead continue to exist, that they have genuine needs, that they have genuine power, and that the relationship between the living and the dead requires ongoing, attentive, practical maintenance, is the Chinese articulation of the same recognition that Haligricity builds the ancestor altar practice on. The burning of offerings to send them to the spirit world, the regular feeding of the ancestors before the family eats, the communal care for those who died without family, these are the practical technologies of a tradition that has maintained the living-dead relationship with unbroken continuity for over 3,000 years. The temple sacred infrastructure of the community. The Chinese folk religion temple is not merely a place of worship, it is the sacred infrastructure of the community, a center of social life, civic governance, community memory, economic activity, and spiritual practice simultaneously. The temple is where the community's gods live, where community disputes are mediated, where community festivals are organized, where births and deaths and significant life events are marked in the presence of the sacred, and where the community comes together as a community rather than merely as a collection of households. Temple architecture as cosmological statement. Chinese temple architecture encodes the cosmic order in its spatial organization. The temple faces south. It is organized along a central north-south axis, with gates, courtyards, and shrine halls arranged in sequence from the front to the back. The main deity shrine is in the most interior, most protected space. The further into the temple you travel, the closer you approach the most concentrated sacred presence. The arrangement mirrors the imperial palace complex, reflecting the theological correspondence between the heavenly court and the earthly administration. The temple as community archive. Chinese folk religion temples function as community archives. Their walls record the names of donors, their stone inscriptions document significant community events, their religious associations maintain genealogical records and community histories. The temple's deity is also the community's history, typically a historical figure from the community's past who was deified because of their local significance. To know the temple's deity is to know the community's foundational narrative about itself. Divination, spirit mediums, and the oracle tradition. Divination is one of the most ancient and most continuously practiced elements of Chinese sacred life. It was the original sacred technology of the oracle bone period, and it continues to be practiced daily throughout the Chinese world in forms ranging from the sophisticated to the intimate. Jiao Bei, the divination blocks. The most widely used divination instrument in Chinese folk religion is the Jiao Bei, a pair of crescent-shaped wooden or bamboo blocks, flat on one side and convex on the other. The practitioner kneels before the deity, states their question, then throws the blocks on the floor. If both flat sides face up, the answer is uncertain or the question must be restated. If both convex sides face up, the deity is laughing. If one flat and one convex face up, Shengbei, sacred agreement, the deity has answered yes. 3 throws of Shengbei in a row is considered a confirmed affirmative answer from the deity. The Jiao Bei are simple, immediate, and universally accessible. No specialist is required, and any sincere practitioner can consult the deity directly through them. Chim, the fortune sticks. The practice of drawing fortune sticks is another widely practiced form of Chinese temple divination. A container of numbered bamboo sticks is shaken until one falls out. The number on that stick corresponds to a specific poem or verse, a classical Chinese poem that serves as the oracular response to the question the practitioner had in mind when shaking the sticks. A specialist then explains the poem's application to the practitioner's specific situation. Spirit mediums. In Chinese folk religion communities, the most direct form of divine communication is through the spirit medium. The Tanki is a person who has been chosen by a specific deity to serve as their earthly vehicle, entering trance states during specific ritual occasions, speaking in the voice of the deity, answering questions, prescribing treatments for illness, adjudicating disputes, and demonstrating their divine possession through specific physical acts, walking on fire, ascending. Ladder of swords, self-mortification with ritual weapons, that are understood as proof that the deity has taken full control of the body and that ordinary physical vulnerability has been suspended. The Tanki tradition is the living connection between Chinese folk religion and the ancient shamanic tradition of the Wu, the spirit intermediaries who are the subject of the third deep dive in this series. The Tanki is the contemporary, urbanized form of the Wu's ancient practice. Sacred festivals and the Chinese calendar. The Chinese lunar calendar organizes time as a sacred cycle. Each month, each day, and each moment has specific auspicious or inauspicious qualities, and the ritual life of Chinese folk religion tracks the sacred year with extraordinary precision. Chinese New Year, first day of the first lunar month. The most important festival in the Chinese sacred year, a 15-day period of ritual renewal, ancestral veneration, and community celebration marking the transition into the new year. Firecrackers drive away evil spirits. New images of the door gods are posted. Red envelopes of money are exchanged as blessings. Elaborate feasts include foods with symbolic significance. Temple visits on New Year's morning to make the first incense offering of the year are among the most important ritual acts of the entire calendar. Lantern Festival, 15th day of the first lunar month. The final day of the New Year celebration, the first full moon of the new year, marked by lantern displays, riddle competitions, and the consumption of tang yuan. In many communities this is also the day the kitchen god returns from heaven after his annual report. Qingming Festival, early April. The primary grave tending and ancestor veneration festival. Families visit graves, make offerings, and burn paper money to send resources to the ancestors in the spirit world. Dragon Boat Festival, 5th day of the 5th lunar month. Commemorating the death of the poet and official Qu Yuan, who drowned himself in the Malo River in protest against political corruption, dragon boat races and the eating of zongzi mark this festival. The dragon boat races themselves originated as an attempt to prevent fish from eating Qu Yuan's body, the community racing to the site of his drowning to drive away the fish with noise and splashing. Ghost Festival, 15th day of the 7th lunar month. The primary festival of the ghost month, when the spirit world gates open and offerings are made to both ancestors and the hungry ghosts who have no family to care for them. Community altars are set up, elaborate offerings are made, and Buddhist monks chant sutras for the relief of the suffering dead. Mid-Autumn Festival, 15th day of the 8th lunar month. The Autumn Harvest Festival, centered on the full moon. Mooncakes are exchanged, mooncakes are offered to the moon goddess Chang'e, and families gather to view the harvest moon together. Chang'e, the goddess who lies on the moon, having swallowed the elixir of immortality, is the central sacred figure of this festival, which is simultaneously a harvest thanksgiving, a family reunion celebration, and a honoring of the moon's yin energy at its annual peak. Winter Solstice Festival. The winter solstice is one of the most important dates in the Chinese sacred calendar, the point of maximum yin energy, from which yin begins its return. Families gather, ancestor offerings are made, and tang yuan or rice porridge is consumed. The Dongji Festival is an old one, predating many of the more widely known seasonal celebrations, and reflects the Chinese cosmological understanding that the solstices are the most significant turning points of the sacred year. Birth, marriage, death, the life cycle rites. Every significant threshold of human life in Chinese folk religion is marked by specific ritual action, not as mere custom but as genuine sacred work that manages the transition between one state of being and another and maintains the individual's proper relationship to the sacred order. Birth. Pregnancy and birth are surrounded by specific ritual protocols in Chinese folk religion. The birth itself is attended by prayers and offerings to the goddess of childbirth and to the child's own natal deity. On the first full month after birth, an elaborate celebration marks the child's formal entry into the social world, with red eggs, red dates, peanuts, longan fruit, and other auspicious foods distributed to the community. The child's horoscope is carefully calculated to determine auspicious dates for significant events in their future. Marriage. Traditional Chinese marriage ceremonies involve elaborate ritual consultations with the ancestors and with diviners. The wedding itself involves multiple stages of ritual exchange between the two families, the formal presentation of the bride to the groom's ancestral altar, and the formal seating of the couple at the wedding feast in a specific arrangement that reflects the cosmological order of the occasion. Death and funerary practice. Chinese funerary practice in the folk religion tradition is one of the most elaborate and most carefully orchestrated sets of ritual procedures in any tradition. The dying person is ideally at home. Dying in a hospital is considered less auspicious because it separates the person from the household's sacred center at the moment of transition. After death, the body is washed, dressed in specific funerary clothing, and laid in a specific orientation within the home. Taoist or Buddhist priests are engaged to perform the ritual chanting that guides the soul through the initial stages of its journey. Elaborate paper offerings are burned to provision the deceased for their afterlife. The body is kept at home for a period determined by the deceased's zodiac sign and the auspicious dates of the calendar before burial or cremation. Chinese folk medicine and the sacred body. Chinese traditional medicine is inseparable from Chinese folk religion in its conceptual foundations and in many of its practical applications. The understanding of the body as a landscape of qi circulation, of yin and yang balance, of the five elements as the organizing principles of organ function and seasonal health, all of these concepts have their roots in the same cosmological framework as Chinese folk religion, and in practice the boundaries between medical treatment, religious ritual, and daily sacred practice blur continuously. Qi and the sacred body. The concept of qi, the vital force that flows through the body, through the natural world, and through the cosmos, is simultaneously a medical concept, a cosmological concept, and a sacred concept. In Chinese folk religion, maintaining proper qi circulation in the body is not merely a health practice, it is a sacred obligation. The body is the temporary dwelling of the Hun and Po, and its proper maintenance is part of the practitioner's sacred responsibility. Sacred healing in folk religion. Chinese folk religion offers several specifically sacred healing modalities alongside conventional medical practice. Temple medicine, receiving prescriptions from deities through divination, incubation dreams at temple sites, or the prescriptions of spirit mediums, addresses the spiritual dimension of illness. Exorcism, the ritual removal of malevolent spirits or spirit intrusions that are causing illness, is performed by Taoist priests. Talisman medicine, the use of written sacred characters activated through specific ritual procedures and then burned, with the ash dissolved in water and drunk by the patient, combines the power of the divine name with the alchemical transformation of writing into healing substance. Feng Shui, sacred geography and the living environment. Feng Shui is the Chinese sacred science of the relationship between the built and natural environment and the flow of qi, the vital force that determines prosperity, health, harmony, and good fortune in any space. Like Chinese medicine, Feng Shui is simultaneously a practical technology and a sacred practice. It is grounded in the same cosmological framework as Chinese folk religion and practiced by specialists whose expertise combines the mathematical with the intuitive, the cosmological with the particular. The principles of Feng Shui. The fundamental principle of Feng Shui is that qi flows through the landscape like water, gathering in some places and dispersing in others, blocked by obstacles and channeled by valleys and waterways. The ideal site for a home or grave is one where qi gathers and is retained, sheltered at the back by a mountain or high ground, open at the front to water, with gently curving approaches that allow qi to meander and accumulate rather than rushing straight through and dissipating. The compass directions, the 5 elements, and the specific birth dates of the inhabitants are all factors in determining the optimal orientation and internal arrangement of a space. Feng Shui and the ancestor's grave. The most consequential application of Feng Shui in traditional Chinese culture is the placement and orientation of ancestors' graves. The ancestral grave in an auspicious Feng Shui position channels the concentrated qi of the earth to the ancestors' remains, and from there, by the principle of correspondence, to their living descendants. The prosperity, health, and good fortune of the entire family line is understood to be significantly influenced by the Feng Shui of the ancestral graves. This belief drove the practice of grave relocation and made Feng Shui masters among the most important specialists in traditional Chinese communities. Connection to Haligricity. Feng Shui's understanding of the living environment as a field of qi circulation, that the arrangement of the home, the workplace, and the gravesite directly affects the vitality, prosperity, and harmony of those who inhabit them, is the Chinese articulation of what Haligricity holds about sacred space. The Haligric approach to setting up the ancestor altar, to opening and closing ceremonial space, to the orientation and arrangement of sacred objects in the home, all reflect the same recognition as Feng Shui, that space is not neutral, that qi flows through it in specific patterns, and that conscious arrangement of the physical environment affects the quality of the sacred experience and the vitality of those who inhabit it. Chinese folk religion today. Chinese folk religion is experiencing a remarkable revival in the early Yi-St century after decades of suppression. The Cultural Revolution targeted religious practice systematically, temples were destroyed, shrines were smashed, spirit mediums and religious specialists were publicly humiliated and sometimes killed, and the practice of ancestor veneration was condemned as feudal superstition. Despite this, the tradition survived, maintained in memory, practiced secretly in homes, and preserved with full vigor in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Singapore, and the Chinese diaspora communities of Southeast Asia and the West. Since the 1980s, with China's relaxation of religious restrictions, Chinese folk religion has revived rapidly. Temples destroyed in the Cultural Revolution have been rebuilt, often by community fundraising. New temples are being constructed. Spirit medium traditions are being revived and documented. The Mizi pilgrimage, the grave-tending festivals, the ancestor altar in the home, all are experiencing significant revivals among younger generations who are rediscovering their cultural and spiritual heritage. Chinese folk religion and the global diaspora. In the Chinese diaspora communities of Southeast Asia, North America, Europe, and Australasia, Chinese folk religion has served as a primary vehicle for cultural identity, community cohesion, and connection to ancestral heritage. Chinatown temples, clan associations, and festival communities have maintained folk religion practice across generations and across oceans. The Lunar New Year celebrations, the Qingming grave visits, the Ghost Festival community altars, these practices have persisted in diaspora communities long after practitioners have lost their Chinese language and adapted to their host cultures in every other respect. The sacred tradition is the deepest root of cultural identity, the last thing to go. Haligricity convergences. Synthesis as sacred methodology. Chinese folk religion's most important gift to Haligricity is methodological. It demonstrates, across 3,000 years and billions of practitioners, that genuine synthesis is not delusion. The Chinese practitioner who burns incense to a Taoist deity, prays to a Buddhist bodhisattva, maintains a Confucian ancestor altar, consults an oracle, and organizes their family's social life around traditional ethical principles is not confused. They are inhabiting the most sophisticated possible relationship to the sacred, a both-seen in orientation grounded not in academic tolerance but in 3 millennia of lived confirmation that the synthesis works. Haligricity is not inventing synthesis. It is joining the most ancient and most thoroughly tested synthesis tradition in the world. The sacred in the everyday. Chinese folk religion's insistence on the sacredness of the everyday, the kitchen god in the kitchen, the earth god in the land, the ancestors at the dining table, the qi in the physical body, is the most complete ancient articulation of what Haligricity holds about the relationship between sacred practice and daily life. Sacred practice in Chinese folk religion is not a special activity that happens in designated sacred spaces and designated sacred times. It is the ongoing, attentive, practical maintenance of the practitioner's relationship to the sacred presences that inhabit every dimension of ordinary life. The Haligric meal blessing, the ancestor altar, the daily energy practices, all reflect this same recognition. The ancestor altar. Chinese ancestor veneration, with its spirit tablets, its regular food offerings, its annual grave visits, its burning of paper goods to send resources to the dead, its ghost festival care for those who have no one to remember them, is the most thoroughly developed practical confirmation in the world of what Haligricity holds about the ancestor altar. The Chinese tradition has maintained this practice continuously for over 3,000 years, across every imaginable historical disruption, because it works. The relationship between the living and the dead is real, active, and mutually beneficial, and its proper maintenance has genuine consequences for the vitality of both the living family and the ancestral community. The heavenly bureaucracy and divine structure. Chinese folk religion's understanding that the divine operates through structure, that the sacred realm has organization, accountability, and specific channels, is the Chinese articulation of what Haligricity holds about working with specific sacred forces, specific deities, and specific elemental presences rather than addressing an undifferentiated divine omnipotence. The Haligric practitioner who works with specific ancestral presences, specific elemental forces, and specific sacred relationships is operating within the same practical theology as the Chinese folk religion practitioner, the recognition that the divine has structure, and that working skillfully with that structure produces results. Qi and the life force practices. The Chinese concept of qi, the vital force that flows through the body, through the natural world, and through the cosmos, is the Chinese articulation of what Haligricity works with in its energy and breath practices. Acupuncture, Qigong, Tai Chi, Chinese herbal medicine, Feng Shui, all are practical technologies built on the recognition that qi is real, that it can be cultivated and directed, and that its proper flow through the body and the environment is essential to health, vitality, and sacred connection. The Haligric breath practices, the lymphatic drainage work, the earthing and grounding, all engage the same fundamental reality that Chinese culture has worked with for over 3,000 years. Divination and the oracle tradition. Chinese folk religion's rich divination tradition, jiaobei blocks, fortune sticks, I Ching consultation, face reading, astrology, spirit medium oracles, reflects the recognition that the divine communicates through specific channels that the properly oriented practitioner can access. The Haligric approach to developing sensitivity to subtle signals is the Haligric practice of the same fundamental capacity that Chinese divination cultivates, the ability to receive information from beyond the ordinary boundaries of conscious knowledge. The gods are in the kitchen. The ancestors are at the table. The earth beneath your feet has a name and a face. This is not religion. This is life. Chinese folk religion teaching. Chinese folk religion does not ask you to choose between the practical and the sacred, between the everyday and the holy, between the living and the dead. It asks you to notice that these are not separate categories, that the kitchen is sacred, the land is sacred, the food on the table is sacred, the dead are present, and the qi that flows through your body this moment is the same qi that flows through the cosmos. Haligricity honors this recognition as the oldest and most thoroughly confirmed synthesis wisdom on earth. Grand Rising. Personal Reading Series Haligricity, IQ Productions, Mei Yiling Yilo.